Number 7. Grace Milan. On December the 1st, 2018, Grace Milan, a 21-year-old from Essex, England, was backpacking her way through New Zealand. It was the day before her 22nd birthday, a birthday that never came. Not much is known about that fateful December night, but by the end of it, Grace's dead body was stuffed into a suitcase by Jesse Shane Kempson. Grace had matched with Kempson on Tinder, and the two apparently had consensual intercourse in his hotel room. While this was happening, Kempson put his hands around Grace's throat and strangled her to death. He claims it was an accident, but immediately after killing Grace, he looked up how to get rid of a dead body on the internet and even viewed pornographic videos while Grace lay dead in his room. The next night, on what would have been Grace's birthday, Kempson matched with another young woman on Tinder. While the two were out on a date, the woman says Kempson spent a lot of time talking about the police and even told her an unnerving story about a friend of his who accidentally killed a young woman and went to prison because of it. Kempson requested the two go back to his hotel room, but the woman felt uncomfortable and said she wanted to leave. Kempson was persistent, but the woman was able to come away unscathed. The same cannot be said for Grace Milan. Her body was found in the Waitakere mountain range. As for Kempson, he will spend the rest of his life behind bars. Number 6. Jerry Smith. On June the 1st, 2021, the police visited the apartment of 40-year-old restaurant project manager Jerry Smith on a requested wellness check. Inside, they found Smith's dead body, bruised and beaten. Smith had posed as a woman named Angie on Tinder. In April, he matched with 18-year-old Isamemim Itut, a freshman at Virginia Tech who played for the university's well-respected football team. The pair met up at Smith's apartment, where they engaged in intimate relations. Itut returned to Smith's residence on May the 31st. It was here that he discovered Smith was actually a man. Enraged by his revelation, Itut violently attacked Smith, punching him in the head a total of 5 times. Smith fell to the floor, but Itut continued his assault. He stomped on Smith's head, shattering all of the bones in his face and knocking out many of his teeth. He fled the scene, leaving Smith to die on the floor of his apartment. Itut was charged with second-degree murder. He was released from custody on a bond of $75,000. He currently lives in his parents' home, where he is required to wear an electronic ankle monitor as he awaits his day in court on September the 23rd. Number 5. Doshant Sharma. In May of 2018, Indian police discovered 27-year-old Doshant Sharma's corpse stuffed inside a suitcase and left on the side of the highway that connects Delhi and Jaipur. Sharma's demise was put in motion when he matched with 27-year-old Priya Seth. Unbeknownst to Sharma, Seth had already been incarcerated multiple times for scamming men she met online. She told her unsuspecting victims that she ran an escort service, but instead would take their money and run. She kept this up for 8 years before she met Sharma. When she matched with him on Tinder, she thought she had hit the jackpot. Sharma claimed to be a stock trader worth millions. Seth employed the help of 2 partners, Dishkant Kamra and Lakshya Walia. The trio kidnapped Sharma and held him from his family for ransom. Sharma's father told them that his son was a small-time trader who was not very wealthy. Realizing they'd been duped, the kidnappers took the little money Sharma's father could offer them, but they did not return his son. They had already stabbed him to death earlier that day. They crammed his body into a suitcase and left him on the side of the road. Before she and her partners were eventually arrested and imprisoned for the murder, Seth went to a 5-star hotel later that same night, looking to swindle yet another victim. Number 4. Molly Mclaren. On June the 28th, 2017, 23-year-old Molly Mclaren left the gym and began walking to her car, which was parked in the lot outside. She had just sent a text through WhatsApp to her friends claiming that she was paranoid about her ex-boyfriend stalking her and that she was looking over her shoulder all the time. That would be the last text Molly ever sent. Minutes later, she was stabbed 75 times by the very man she feared might do her harm. Molly had matched with 26-year-old Joshua Stimson on Tinder many months prior. After texting back and forth for a while, the two decided to finally meet up. Molly felt a strong connection with Stimson, who sympathized with her past battles with anxiety and depression. The pair sparked up a relationship. They dated for 7 months before Molly eventually grew tired of Stimson's increasingly controlling behavior. She ended things with him, but he wouldn't let her go that easily. That's when the stalking began. He began posting malicious rumors about Molly on social media, falsely claiming she was a drug addict and tagging her family members on his posts. Stimson also stalked her in person, showing up while she was out with her friends and begging her to take him back. Molly was concerned he might eventually try to hurt her. She contacted the police and talked to her relatives about her worries. Stimson was warned by the police to stay away from her, but he didn't listen. He tracked her location on the night of June the 28th and waited near her car while she was inside the gym. As she got in her car, he attacked her. He stabbed her 75 times while she tried to drive away. Stimson was arrested and sentenced to a minimum of 26 years in prison for the murder. Number 3. Warrianna Wright. What started as a fun night out for 26-year-old Warrianna Wright ended with her begging her Tinder date to let her go before she plummeted to her death from the balcony of his 14th floor apartment. In August of 2014, Wright was in Australia for a friend's wedding and matched with 30-year-old Gable Tosti on Tinder. He invited her to his high-rise apartment, and it was here that the two began drinking and engaging in intimate activities that were most likely violent in nature. Audio files of that night were pulled from Tosti's phone. These files reveal that he had tied Wright up at some point, and there were sounds consistent with Wright being choked that could be heard in the recordings. The two were shouting at each other loudly, which was later confirmed by Tosti's neighbors. Tosti eventually locked Wright out on the balcony, and the neighbors heard her pleading with him to let her go home. It wasn't long after she went out on the ledge that Wright fell, descending 14 flights to the ground, dying on impact. Tosti frantically called his father and told him what had happened. Though he was initially arrested following the incident, he was released on the condition that he stay with his parents. Eventually, Tosti was acquitted of Wright's killing, and he was allowed to go free. Earlier this year, Tosti was involved in yet another incident on his high-rise balcony. A woman he was with threatened to jump off before she was ultimately hospitalized for a mental health assessment. Once again, Tosti was absolved of any wrongdoing. Today's topic was requested by Sheena Lee. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Angela J. After being stabbed multiple times by her ex-boyfriend, 28-year-old Angela J., a licensed medical doctor, calmly instructed her neighbors as they administered first aid to her. Angela had met 36-year-old Paul Lambert on Tinder. The two dated for 2 months, but Angela then decided to end their relationship. Lambert, a banker in Sydney, Australia, wasn't ready to let Angela go, so he didn't. He stalked his former girlfriend, inundating her with endless calls and text messages, begging her to take him back. She tried to ignore him, hoping he would give up and leave her alone. Lambert didn't stop, however, and eventually the situation got much more serious. Angela lived in Port Macquarie, which is about a 4-hour drive from Sydney. The distance had initially kept her stalker away, but that soon changed. Lambert took the trip up to Port Macquarie and broke into Angela's house while she was at work. When she returned home, Lambert accosted her, pouring gasoline on her and stabbing her with a knife repeatedly. Angela fled to her neighbor's house. She remained calm and focused as she talked the neighbor through how to stop the bleeding. An ambulance arrived and rushed her to the hospital. Luckily, Angela survived the attack and lived to tell the harrowing tale. Lambert was not so lucky. After a 90-mile police chase, his tires were punctured by officers in pursuit. He got out of his vehicle and attacked the police with a knife and was subsequently shot dead. Number 1. Ashlyn Black. 25-year-old Ashlyn Black of Layton, Utah, was found brutally murdered in the early hours of Sunday morning, May the 24th of 2020. The previous night, she had matched on Tinder with 24-year-old Ethan Robert Hunsaker. The two briefly messaged back and forth before agreeing to meet up for a date. Hunsaker picked Ashlyn up from her house around 9 p.m. and the two went on their way. First, they stopped at a local bar where they had a relatively uneventful date filled with drinking and casual chit-chat. They then agreed to go back to Hunsaker's residence. Ashlyn was initially taken aback by the state of Hunsaker's apartment. The place was vacant. No furniture, no decorations, just an empty house. She nevertheless followed Hunsaker into the bedroom where the two made love. Afterwards, they fell asleep next to one another on the floor. Ashlyn was awoken with a shock. Hunsaker was attempting to strangle her, tightly gripping her neck for close to a minute. Ashlyn tried to fight back, scratching at her date's arms and neck, but her feeble attempts to escape were futile. Hunsaker grabbed a 4-inch pocket knife and proceeded to stab Ashlyn in the chest, sides, and back nearly 10 times. He sat next to her, watching her gradually bleed to death. Hunsaker then called 911 and confessed to the murder. He requested that the police kill him upon arrival, but he was arrested without incident. Apparently, Ethan Hunsaker had been struggling with mental health issues for some time and regularly had homicidal and suicidal thoughts before he ultimately acted on them with Ashlyn that night. Hunsaker pleaded guilty to a charge of first-degree murder, but he awaits a mental health examination before his final sentence is handed down. Thanks for watching. Would you rather get catfished on Tinder or think you won $10 million in the lottery, only to find out the ticket was fake? Let us know in the comments section below.